Welcome back to another XDP Manufacturer Q&A. In this one, I'm joined by Justin from S&S Diesel to learn more about the CP4 Disaster Prevention Bypass Kit. Also commonly referred to as a CP4 Bypass or just Disaster Prevention Kit, we'll take you through what disaster we're preventing, what it does for your truck, and why you should run one. So Justin, what is the CP4 Disaster Prevention Bypass Kit?
Well, in the simplest form, it prevents disaster by preventing contaminated fuel, potentially with metal in it, to go on to the high pressure fuel system, your injectors, stuff like that, the really expensive parts. So it does that with this bypass block, and right here, this portion goes down into the CP4 where the inlet metering valve would normally go. That blocks off the fuel that would normally come from the case and go on into the pumping elements. And then since we're blocking off that flow, we still need to be able to get fuel to the inlet metering valve to go onto the injectors. And we do that by clipping this into the stage 2 factory fuel filter. So you're getting the cleanest fuel as possible. If there is potentially a failure, then that contaminated fuel will go out the return of the pump and it will be caught in this return filter.
So now we know a little bit about what the kit does, but why would somebody need to run this kit on their truck?
Well, the main benefit of the disaster prevention kit is the disaster it prevents. And when a CP4 fails, it typically makes a lot of fine metal debris. That metal debris can go through your injectors and it will basically damage the seals in the injectors and just wreaks havoc on them. So those injectors are very expensive compared to the fuel pump. So the disaster prevention kit is more or less just a fairly inexpensive insurance policy. It costs $400. It can save you north of $10,000 in repairs to get a new high pressure fuel system installed. If you do have a CP4 failure with a disaster prevention kit installed, all you need to do is replace the CP4 and the return filter, rather than typically, if you don't have one installed, you have to replace the entire fuel system.
Obviously, a CP4 failure can cause a lot of trouble. What are some of the common signs of CP4 failure?
Well, we haven't been able to pinpoint, exactly like a certain mileage that a CP4 fails. We've seen them fail fairly early with like less than 10,000 miles, and we've seen CP4s go 500,000 miles and plus. So we can't really pinpoint exactly when it will fail. I mean, causes of CP4 failure typically is fuel contamination. The CP4 is actually, it's a really good pump, but it's designed to be ran on perfect fuel, perfectly clean number 2 diesel. They are very sensitive to any type of contaminants, water, rust, DEF, any of those things. So, I guess you could say if we could pinpoint a cause, it would usually be some type of contamination, but yet we've also seen CP4s fail that have had perfectly clean fuel in the tank. So can't really quite put our finger on it.
So when it comes to the new kit versus the old kit, have you guys noticed any difference in success rate or anything like that?
Absolutely. So the original disaster prevention kit, we had a really high success rate, but there was a few failures, or I guess you could say a few instances of it not containing all the fuel. The Gen 2.1 is perfect. We have not had a single report of it not working. We get reports quite often that it didn't work, and whenever that happens, we reach out to the shop or the truck owner, and we get the injectors, we get the CP4, we get everything back for inspection to verify, and it not once has it actually been verified. We take, I guess, the reputation of our products very seriously, and of course, if something didn't do what we say it's going to do, we want to know about it. With that, we actually failed a CP4 on our own company truck just to make sure that it works in a real world environment. Here's an example of the cam and what it looks like, but we failed a CP4 in the worst way possible just to make sure that the kit would work and do its job. And I personally drove the truck with a failed CP4 towing a trailer, and it sounded horrible. And it broke down on me in the worst place possible, 4 lanes of traffic on the interstate. But we managed to unhook the trailer, and that truck still drove another 70 miles under its own power to the ultimate call-out challenge. And then we had a chase vehicle pull the trailer or whatever. But I guess that's just a story. That's my own personal experience. That's why when I talk to people on the phone and stuff, like, I know it works because I experienced when it did. And when we got to the UCC, we pulled the return filter off of the truck just to inspect, and there was all kinds of metal. but there was nothing in the metering valve. It was clean. This is the metering valve right here that was in the truck with that bad of a failure. So that's, I guess, one example of it working in a real world, but we haven't had a single proven report of it not working.
Have you found that this issue is specific to a certain model year range, or are the newer trucks still having these issues?
Yeah, based on our experience, the newer trucks still have this issue as well. Obviously, an older truck has more mileage on it and more mileage on the pump. Your chances of a failure go up. But even the newer trucks, they made an improvement in, I believe it was 2020, with pin buckets to keep the rollers from turning 90 degrees. But we still see failure modes of the buckets not turning, just the roller skidding, and it just stops and makes metal that way. So I guess they did make some improvements to the newer trucks, so the failure rate with those trucks might be a little bit lower, but we still do see failures in the newer trucks.
Is this kit something the average weekend warrior can install at home, or would you recommend that they bring it to a shop to get it installed?
This kit is great for someone to install at home. If you are a weekend warrior, then I would plan on a weekend to get it done. Obviously, depending on what shop you take it to, some shops may not do as good a job as others, but it can also be installed at the shop. I guess you could say our recommendation is go with what works best for you, what you're most comfortable with. If you don't feel like you're a decent enough mechanic to do it yourself, then by all means take it to a shop, because proper installation of a disaster prevention kit is crucial. There's, I guess, some common mistakes or pitfalls that you can run into. Obviously, you always need to inspect the inlet metering valve before you install it, just to make sure that the CP4 hadn't already started failing, because if it does, then the disaster prevention kit's not going to help you at all. So that's why, you'd reference a clean metering unit. That's why you always want to make sure that the metering unit is clean before you install the disaster prevention kit. Another thing that we've seen is just the consequence of having a high pressure fuel system open. High pressure common rail fuel systems are very sensitive to debris, and it only takes a speck of debris to make a high pressure valve. I mean, these systems are running upwards of 2,500 bar, which is 30,000-ish PSI. All it takes is one little speck of debris to seize that valve, or to make the valve not functional. So we've seen that before. As a result of the fuel system being open, a small piece of debris will get in one of the valves of the CP4, and you'll get a no start after installing a disaster prevention kit. Typical symptoms is it starts, it runs, and then it dies, and it will not start up again. And that's the amount of time it took for that piece of debris that was somewhere downstream to make its way into that valve. If this happens, there's actually something you can try in the field, and it sounds crazy, but it has worked a lot. You'll need the help of one of your friends, and have one person crank the truck, the other person take a extension and a socket, or a socket extension, not necessarily a socket, and like a brass hammer, like not a sledgehammer, a light hammer, and put that extension right on the high pressure outlet of the pump. That's where the outlet valve is, and just start tapping on it while the truck is cranking. And a lot of times it will dislodge the debris and send it on downstream, and the truck will fire. If that doesn't work, then a lot of times you can send us your CP4, and we can extract the debris for you.
So now that I'm adding another filter on my truck to maintain, how often should I change the filter?
Well, just to make it easy, we recommend changing the return filter the same schedule as your factory fuel filters. In theory, the fuel going into the high pressure, into the, I guess you'd say the CP4 is already clean. It should already be filtered. So don't expect this filter to really be that dirty. Like, you could get away with not changing it on that interval, but that's our recommendation, just to ensure that the filter is always clean. Or if you do have a failure, you also need to change it.
Do you guys recommend that I cut the filter open during service? And what would be some signs for me to look for that would indicate that my CP4 might be starting to fail?
Well, it's a good idea. If you have the ability to cut open a filter after every interval, I think that's a good idea, because it's a diagnostics tool. It gives you the ability to kind of see what's going on with your fuel system. You don't have to cut the filter open to see if your CP4 is failing. A lot of times you can just screw the filter off and then just look around on the inside, and you'll see very, very fine metal particles. We did I guess you could say, debris analysis of a CP4 failure, just to get an idea of like what the particle size is, and there's a wide range. And so you'll get the big glittery pieces that everyone knows, the disco party and all that. but you also get very, very fine debris that almost looks like graphite. And that I guess you could say that's the range of debris size that you'll be looking for. But typically, look for glitter inside the filter is an easy indication of a failed CP4.
We've actually got this 6.7 Powerstroke behind us with about 75,000 miles on it. We installed the S&S CP4 disaster prevention kit about 5,000 miles ago with a clean metering unit. We can go over, take a look, pull the filter out, and see what somebody who's running this kit might actually be looking for. Let's go over to the truck and take a look. So tell me what we're looking at here.
So what you want to inspect is if there is a failure. A lot of times you'll find glitter, metal debris right around here. See where all these holes are? The way the filter is the inside's clean, but the outside of the filter, that would be coming from the pump. So that's where, and this isn't always a surefire way of telling. Sometimes the debris will actually be in the filter, and if you want to take it one step further, you can cut a filter apart and inspect it that way. But a lot of times, at least my personal experience, when we failed the CP4 on our company truck, I pulled the return filter off, and there was just all kinds of metal debris, and it's really fine. Kind of reminds you of like pencil graphite. It's that fine, but that's what I would be looking for.
That's a wrap on the S&S CP4 Disaster Prevention Bypass Kit. A big thanks to Justin from S&S for taking the time to answer our questions. To learn more and to get a kit for your truck, head on over to XDP today.